Welcome to Two Lads to the Scheme. I'm Aidan Martin.
And I'm Mark Deans.
We're here with Candice McKenzie and Emily Beaney. Going to start by just asking you to explain to the viewers what endometriosis is.
Sure. So endometriosis is described as the uterine lining, basically. They try to suggest that endometriosis is displaced endometrial lining. And I say allegedly because there's so many different theories out there. But the theory is, as far as everybody's concerned, leading by the narrative, is your endometrial lining comes away, but it's found outside of your pelvis. When those cells are found outside your pelvis, they react to inflammation and cause localized bleeding. Once you have, let's say, an area of endometriosis, the chances are it can spread reasonably quickly onto another area, just with gravity alone. So say you had a little bit on your ovary, it could bleed down into your peritoneum. That would then give you more endometriosis. So every single month a lady goes through her menstrual cycle, her endometriosis will react and behave to inflammation and markers, and she will become poorly and triggered with endometriosis. So there's nowhere for the lining as such to go once it's in the pelvis. It will literally remain there until it's surgically removed or until it's shrank using cancer drugs, to be perfectly honest. It affects 1 in 10. They say it's 176 million women around the world, but going on new stats, it looks like it's closer to 200 million. There is no cure for it, and as far as Endo warriors are concerned, along with our colleagues and other group leaders, it's a full body condition with no cure.
Okay, so I asked you straight away just to go into endometriosis because, for the purpose of anyone watching who's not familiar, you started up an organisation, a voluntary organisation called Endo Warriors. And together with Emily, you created a film called Deviant.
Correct. Which
Mark and I watched. How long ago did you start up Endo Warriors, and when did you come together to make this film?
So Endo Warriors has been officially established for 6 years now. We didn't quite start off like that. It was running for a couple of years before we became official, simply because I wasn't quite sure at that point if we had an audience for the Endo Warriors. So it started off really organically. So it started off with me being on Facebook and initially talking to other local women, could be women in Falkirk or Stirling, wherever that might be. And I'd then go and meet them at a garden centre and would spend a Saturday afternoon talking about their journey and their experiences with endometriosis. I found myself in a position where I had no more Saturdays left to meet women at garden centres, and it was also costing me a fortune. You know, a cup of tea in Dobies isn't cheap. So it was I kind of had it in my mind that we were going to have to grow in a really effective way. While I was speaking to women about endometriosis, I happened to come across a lady called Claire Beattie. And Claire had just had really aggressive bowel surgery lasting 9 hours for her endometriosis. So when I walked up to the lady's door, I didn't know her, she was a stranger. And she opened the door to me, and I just thought, oh, you're lovely. Went in, we had a wee chat, spoke a lot about Claire's endometriosis. And I told her what the plans were, what my vision was for the Endo Warriors, and she signed up on the spot. She basically said, count me in, I want to do this with you. So that was it. We basically had a small management team in play then, and we started to grow the group. And yeah, we've got 860 odd members in our private hub at the moment. Wow. 2,500 followers. Considering we started off with nothing, you know what I mean, a handful of women, we've grown quite beautifully, especially considering we're not a proper charity and we're not actually, you know, we're not on Endo UK's website, which is where most women would go to get information on endometriosis. And it's kind of sad because with them being a charity, you would expect a little bit better for them to be more open to other organisations that all have the same aim and desires to get to a certain point. But they haven't been supportive of us, and I'm quite happy to say that. That didn't stop us at all. We've just kept growing and growing. But the group is very special to me. It was born from a pain management appointment. And I went to the appointment hoping and praying that they would be able to do something to help me. And I was very disillusioned and saddened to find out that they couldn't do anything to help me, that all they really wanted to do to help me was to prescribe me with gabapentin. And as a woman with a profuse nodule sticking out her pelvis, as a hysterectomy woman, my brain couldn't understand how she was trying to tell me I was dealing with phantom limb. And I'm saying to myself, how can you say I've got phantom limb and I need to be on gabapentin? And she said, well, that's just the way endometriosis works. You know, it's almost as if you've got phantom limb, you've got nerve damage, and that's the pain that you're now in. Totally disregarding the physical appearance of my body, which ended up being a nasty endometriosis nodule that had grown through muscle. So my endometriosis hasn't just been inside my pelvis, it is now outside my pelvis. I'm having problems with my kidneys and my lungs. And that's basically, the group started on the basis that I didn't want any other woman in the locality to ever suffer the way I did that day, because I came out that appointment feeling absolutely disbelieved and broken. And I had to sit and tell my husband that was the opinion that they had of me that day, was that I was a phantom limb patient as such. So when you tell your partner that it appears that your pain is in your head and not in your body, your partner will then go, oh, right. And that changes things a little bit. It takes away the power from the woman to say, well, yeah, this affliction isn't actually just down here, it's actually problems up here. I'm not suggesting that the problem isn't up there, but I'm suggesting the problem's full body and everything talks to each other, you know. So for me, endometriosis is a full body condition with no cure, and we need all the investment and research we can to try and get some recognition, acknowledgement, validation for the community that we live in.
We heard in the movie as well that it is difficult to diagnose, first of all. So there's lots of women, I know women that have went through literally like 3 or 4 years of appointments and uncomfortable assessments and being examined basically to still have no idea what's causing it or where it's come from, or in the end they're lucky to find it, to get diagnosed. But even that's the kind of start of an even worse journey, because there is no cure for it.
Okay.
How often would you say that it goes undiagnosed like that?
Oh, well, it's the numbers are shocking. They say it's 1 in 10 at the moment is getting diagnosed, but given the diagnosis time is between 8 and 10 years, if you can imagine, during that 8 to 10 years, your fertility is also in jeopardy, because the condition itself can stop your eggs from jumping, so it can cause ectopic pregnancies, and in some instances, women go on to have several miscarriages. So we don't understand endometriosis yet, or really what it's about. But what we do know is that there's a lot more women out there with it than they probably know. It's extremely common, but extremely underdiagnosed. And I think because there's no spit test or a blood test, you really have to have it seen on an MRI or on a CT scan. And most of the time, the only way to really diagnose it is through laparoscopic surgery, which is going into your navel and having a look. But we've got lots of women as well that have had unsuccessful laps and have been told that they look fine, and then go on and have a second lap privately, and it's very much there, you know. So I think we're at the mercy of who's being trained, what they're being trained in, the fact they're working to nice guidelines, the fact the nice guidelines aren't really very good guidelines. And all that time, who's suffering? It's the woman. Our family, our partner, our job, our life. Everything that makes that woman function is in jeopardy because of a nasty thing called endometriosis.
It's a thing, sorry, I was just going to say, it's a thing, up until about 7 or 8 years ago, I'd never seen it anywhere. Like literally no one spoke about it, I didn't know anyone that had had it. And then slowly but surely, I started seeing people get diagnosed. I've got one of my mum's cousins has got it. But up until then, again, I'd never even heard it before. Is it a relatively new discovery, would you say, in terms of like medical discovery?
Think no, way back to the witches. So way back, yawn, when we had witches and things like that. They were just honoured by the Scottish Government. 300 witches recently have been exonerated from being witches. So one of the problems we had in yesteryear was that a woman would obviously display pelvic pain, heavy periods, heavy menstrual cramps, etc. And back in the olden days, it was really shunned upon for a woman to be poorly in a village, for example. If that woman then decided to go and try other means, not Western medicine, for example, she could be called a witch. And a lot of them believed if there was heavy bleeding involved that you were in fact a witch. So there's lots of women being burnt at the stake because they've had sore tummies. And that's the truth, and that's actually really sad. It can go, I mean, I've read quite a lot on it, and there's drawings of it on Egyptian walls demonstrating Cleopatra had issues with gynecological problems. And, you know, I think as long as there's a woman and there's ectopic endometrial tissue inside a body, it's going to be there. I think one of the problems we're dealing with now is environmental factors. Environmental factors are a massive thing in our community, and we've got so many different triggers in our foods and even just walking outside, you know what I mean? It's your environment's changed now. But with social media, everybody's sharing. So what was kind of hidden away back in the 50s or 60s is really out now, because people are quite happy to talk about things compared to in the 80s, where, you know, you didn't talk about Tampax and, you know, there's a sanitary towel advert on the telly, didn't look, you know, it's changed for the better, but we still need more. You know? I
think we're living in a time now where things are being less stigmatised. We talk about it all the time in terms of addiction and recovery and things like that. Obviously, female health and men's health to a certain degree as well, in certain aspects, is becoming less stigmatised. And I think it's important because people die because they don't talk.
Correct. Correct.
Stigma was what I was going to ask about. I was going to ask, how much has it changed since the witches been burned at the stake? What's the metaphorical burning at the stake now? Is it the attitudes of health professionals that you come across, the attitudes of other people, and also environmental triggers? What are those? Yeah,
so gaslighting is a massive thing for our community. And gaslighting comes in many different shapes and forms.
When you say in your community, is that within the endo community, or is that out with, as in people who don't understand it?
Well, that's a very good question. It's almost double-sworded as well, because if you don't understand your endo person, then you may be gaslighting without intending to gaslight, you know. So, I mean, it's a relatively new word that's jazzy and everybody's using, but it means something. And most of the time it's doctors or nurses, unfortunately, and sometimes partners as well, who our women all quite openly say they feel misunderstood, and they'll explain why they feel misunderstood, and ultimately it's a form of gaslighting, you know. A doctor sitting down, much like I described to you guys, talking about, you know, the pain's in your head, the pain's somewhere else, it's not in your pelvis, you know, and that's not helpful to us as women. You know, we need you to tell us why that pain's there, what can we do to solve it, and if you can't solve it, what do I do with the rest of my life? But there's no manual, there's no guidelines to kind of keep you right as an endo woman, you know. So you take each day as it comes. And environmental triggers and food triggers are things like, we ask a woman to be very careful with soy, because soy gets turned into estrogen inside your body, and estrogen's a massive trigger to us. Endometriosis makes its own estrogen as well, so it's a very, very clever little cell, a very smart little cell. And it doesn't really need much from you, but if you're giving it a little bit of estrogen, it's almost like you're watering the garden. So we can watch women have a Chinese meal on a Friday night, and come Saturday, so right off, they're gone. No alcohol involved, just the food. And they're having symptoms of IBS, or they're having problems with their tummy. Other things that can affect us is stuff like chlorine. Chlorine's, you know, we've got lots of women that love swimming, but they've noticed that once they come out the swimming pool, they end up with a UTI, or they have some problems with their kidneys, or there's something just not quite right. But I think while we don't have the relevant investment or funding into the condition, we're always going to remain with this hypothesis or these theories around endometriosis. But for me, they're less theory and they're more factual, you know, because the women are displaying it in our group. There's no hiding it. It's right, it's there, black and white. I did this happened, what am I going to do about it, you know?
One of the things that made me feel sad was when you talked about the larger, more UK-wide organisation not giving you support, because I didn't know about endometriosis until you guys started doing all your campaigning, and I saw it on social media. I know Claire, I've known Claire since we were kids. So when she posted about it, you know, started to take it seriously, and it was the symptoms that caught my attention, because some of the symptoms are so brutal. Yeah. And I couldn't turn away from that. Yeah. And some people might go, oh, you shouldn't have put that stuff. I'm glad that was on social media, because it made me aware of it. And then for ages, I was like, we need to talk to you. And we can't change things, but we can help raise awareness, and we can play a part and support the journey. And so I would say grassroots, well, we would say this anyway because we're grassroots, but grassroots organisations are so important. Because that massive UK-wide organisation didn't reach me.
Yes.
You guys reached me.
Yeah.
So grassroots is important, right? What I don't want to scaremonger the audience, but let's just be honest. What symptoms should people be aware of that could potentially be endometriosis? What symptoms should they be aware of?
So there's a multitude of different symptoms, and every woman's a little different. Not one woman will necessarily be the same, but things to look out for is the week leading up to your period. You usually find that you start to have some issues with your bowel slowing down. You're not going to the toilet as frequent. You're getting a lot of anal pain right up your back end. You start to take an endo bloat. You feel extremely fatigued, and there's pain. The pain's usually phenomenal. So it could be pain from an ovary, it could be 2 ovaries, it could be intestinal cramping. Everything's around pain and inflammation with endometriosis. We've got a lot of women that live pretty much with constant urinary tract infections. That's another red flag, you know. The sad thing is that while the investment isn't there, they're still only looking at endo women and saying, oh, you know, ovaries, uterus, fallopian tube, cervix, take all them away, then you've eradicated endometriosis. But that's not the case. But it just takes, suppose an ovary stuck down to a bit of sidewall, abdominal sidewall, the woman will feel the most profuse pain, stuff that would probably make you vomit. You know, it's a pain like no other. I've found myself on all fours in the bathroom floor panting, you know, or as I said on STV, praying to die, you know. It shouldn't be sure to go for a shit without being terribly crude. And unfortunately for our women, it's 16 days before they can move their bowels in some instances. You're carrying a handbag full of waste around with you. Nothing good comes from that. Infection, etc. You know, it's not pleasant. And that's one of the issues as well, is as the disease progresses, it creates adhesions, it creates ulcers, it creates lesions. And every single month, they all come together and react as soon as your brain releases that bit of hormone to say, right guys, it's time to have your period. And unless you know what to look out for, you could just be thinking every month, God, I've got another tummy bug. I know when I was younger, I thought the hospital told me at 9 years old that I had IBS. And I firmly believed that right up until I was told otherwise. I couldn't explain why IBS at 9 years old, but they put me on laxatives, and trying to be a kid at school on laxatives was absolutely embarrassing. But you did what had to be done until you reach the age of 14. You start to look at your friends and you're like, they're not like me. We're totally different. They're having a period that's lasting 4 or 5 days, and mine's is 10 days long, and I'm off school for 3 of them, and I'm vomiting profusely, and it's almost like being horribly, like, you know, some women are really ill being pregnant. It's a little bit like that, but add in pain, you know. The nausea is, whoa. I've tried everything to try and get rid of the nausea. I've put things on my wrists. I've tried different drugs, but there's a sicky feeling that comes, and you don't know how to handle that.
Sounds fucking awful, man.
It is.
That's why as well, I think I'm glad you have the freedom and the clarity to just express it, because I think that's what's going to get people to be more aware of it, is the expression of it. And like I say, that's how I noticed it. Claire would put up certain pictures. They weren't like inappropriate, they were just they were necessarily graphic to show you the pain, and that's what caught my attention. It was the pain. It was like, oh my God, these women are in so much pain. And then I was, in writing we call it a hook, so the hook was there, and there was certain words that drew me to it, and then I couldn't. And also the colour scheme, the black and yellow, I like that as well. Emily, how do you come into this as a filmmaker to support the cause and create the film Deviant?
Yeah, so my twin sister has endometriosis, and I just started my PhD, and I was doing some research into, I guess, like chronic illness and women's experiences of chronic illness in particular. And I knew from my twin sister just how misunderstood endometriosis was and the lack of care involved and things, and I really wanted to address that. And so my research uses experimental film practice to explore lived experiences of illness. And like yourself, I kind of found out about the Endo Warriors through social media. And I also was really drawn in by that grassroots initiative. And it was really clear that this was a group of women that was like self-organized. And for the women in the group, it was like a community that was really strong. And I was just so taken in by that. And I guess, yeah, I really wanted to work with Candice and with the Endo Warriors to create something that could maybe like give women a voice in endometriosis. And I think it felt like there was something missing, because we had the statistics of how many women had endometriosis, and it just felt like there was a real lack of response to that. And I felt like something needs to be done. And I think it was my hope that we could come together and create a film that kind of gave a bit of a say in what was going on.
Yeah.
It's a very intense watch. We watched it the other day, and it's uncomfortable to watch as well. Like we were sitting having lunch, we were watching it, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't have had lunch while we were watching it, but it's intense, and I think there's lots of like overlapping voices and things like that. It makes it's just uneasy to watch, but it's impactful.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask, was that the visual style that you chose purposely to represent the illness?
Yeah. So it was about trying to find a way of almost like looking at the film as like a body in itself, and like making that viewing experience to feel almost like, I mean, like, I guess I've always like heard you say like, it's not about like people can't understand the pain. And I think for me, it was like accepting that, okay, the audience isn't going to understand what it's like to live with endometriosis, but maybe they can feel with you, feel like I want to take action as well. And I think that was what I wanted to come across. So like maybe feel some of that discomfort and think like something needs to be done.
It was effective. Yeah,
it worked. It really worked. How did you feel about using a creative method to express your journey and the journey of other women that are going through this?
I don't think we could have had a better opportunity to try and give us a voice, to be honest. It's excuse me, it's something that I actually manifested. It's actually brilliant that you found me, by the way, because I was pure thinking about it. I've always been under the impression that to have a voice, it's good to demonstrate your journey, especially through film, you know. And when Emily obviously reached out, it was exactly the platform that I felt we needed as a community, just to break the taboos, the stigma, and actually some of the ignorance that's surrounding women's health, and in particular this condition, you know. So it was a gift horse for me, you know, and it's been so well received, not only by, you know, the Endo Warriors that we've got in our group, but by their family members and employers, and lots of different people have taken things from it. I mean, we had a woman, for example, who was getting a terrible time off her manager because she was off sick a lot. She wasn't able to go into work. And I says, send them Deviant, just give them a little insight into your life and have a chat. So she did, and the boss has been absolutely fantastic with her since then, because the understanding has changed. A lot of the time you're at the mercy of what's on Google, and Google's not quite right all the time. Do you know what I mean? So, and also when you go and speak to doctors, it's almost like, you know, it's just this wee woman's problem that'll come and it'll go and everything will be all right. But it's nothing like that. It's surrounded in lies. Do you know what I mean? And we're trying to change the narrative here so that people go, endometriosis, oh, you don't want that. That's what we're aiming for. We're not wanting folk to go, endo what? Oh yeah, that heavy period problem. No, it's no a heavy period problem. It's a nasty chronic condition. You know, it's different. You've not just cut your finger. It's something that happens 21 days out of your calendar month that you are dealing with endometriosis, you know.
See, the campaign in the film, the first feeling for me as a man who's not experienced that was, oh, I can't look, and then it's, I can't look away.
Aye.
I can't not look. I can't not take this message on board, and I can't not do anything about it. And not that we ourselves can change it, but we were just like, we need to speak to you about this. We need to do whatever we can and shout about it and talk to people about it and raise awareness about it. Were you going to come in with something?
Yeah, I was just going to say about, you said about the heavy period problem. Like, obviously the discussion in the film about that. So it was like, oh, when you're 15, you can't go out with your mates because of this, and you can't, and people at work judge you like, oh, God's sake, she's off again or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that must be horrendous. Do you know what I mean? And you can't, you're already dealing with all that physical shit, all the physical pain and that, and you having then to try and outwardly project to people like, do you know what, I'm suffering.
That's really impacting on your mental well-being, actually. I was with an employer for 25 years and I was looked over for promotion on every occasion because I had endometriosis. They were happy for me to train up new members of staff and promote them, but they weren't prepared to move me out my slot. And I remember being put on Zoladex. I was 21 years old, and Zoladex is a drug they would give for patients on breast cancer. It's a really nasty drug as well. It's a massive injection, and put it into your pelvis, and it puts you into a chemical state of menopause. So at 21 years old, there's nobody in your work environment prepared or accepting of a 21-year-old being in menopause. And I remember being really, really upset by that. I went to a boss and I said, you know, my colleague has a desk fan. She is in menopause. I'm also in menopause. Is there any way that I could get a desk fan as well? And I was told, no, absolutely not. And I said, well, why? Because you're not in menopause. But I am. No, you're not. I've been physically put in menopause by a cancer drug. Why am I not the same as my colleague? So there's problem number one. You know, two women in the same form of menopause, but looked on completely differently. And that's really, really sad because we were both experiencing menopause. It just happened to be that my one was chemical. Just exactly the same symptoms, did exactly the same nonsense to your body. But I was looked on differently because I was 21 and she was 47.
Would it be fair to say you're treated like a deviant then?
Yes.
Is this where the name comes in? Do you want to explain about the name deviant?
Yeah, so I came across it was like a term about deviance in sort of like medical anthropology kind of courses that I was looking into. And it was like a kind of term that was used for people when you're expected to perform certain kind of roles when you're sick, and when you can't kind of give like a formal diagnosis, and like with conditions like Endo where it takes like 7 or 8 years, you haven't got this like diagnosis to be like, this is why I'm sick, this is why I can't do all these things. You sort of tend to be a deviant person because you're not fulfilling all the roles you're supposed to be doing in society, and you can't say that you're sick because you've not got a diagnosis. So I became really interested in this idea of deviance and why some people were being termed deviant, and how we could kind of like flip that on its head. And yeah, I think, try and like reclaim some of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great name. My own background being a recovering addict. This isn't about addiction, this episode, but just very briefly, as an addict, couldn't get help, all the same kind of stuff, different journey, but some similar experiences, and being treated like a deviant rather than someone who needed help. So I love the name deviant because I thought I can identify from a different perspective, but enough common ground that I can say, okay, I know what it's like to feel like a deviant when I just need help. You talked about the impact it had professionally, and please only answer what you're comfortable with, but as far as friendships, relationships, how has it had an impact on your life?
Oh, it's had a massive impact on my life. My husband and I, we were supposed to go to Australia before I got my diagnosis, but because I got a diagnosis, it actually changed the way that our life was going to go. So I'd met Scott, and I knew, like I said, I knew for multiple years that something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was. And my mum just kept saying, you know, it's okay to have these big heavy periods and whatnot. And when you start to have sex with somebody, you start to realise that there's something. You've got a problem, but you've got another problem as well. So making love in itself, unfortunately for a lot of us, comes with extreme pain, either during or after. So that in itself is a burden on anybody's relationship, because special cuddles really matter. Intimacy really matters in a relationship. But when you can't bear yourself, you know, to your partner, and I know I'm not alone with this, there's lots of women like this, it's very sad because you got together because you loved each other and you liked each other, and suddenly there's this grey mist being put between you where your intimacy's been affected. You can't quite come together as one the way that you used to. And yeah, there's other things you can do in the bedroom, etc. That's fine. But you cannot possibly try and say that having a wee play with each other is the same as being intimate and having and making love. Making love is making love, you know, holding each other, embracing each other, whatever that may be. So that's really important in a relationship, and that's something that sadly affects certainly me personally, and I know it affects lots of other women as well. Other things, daft things like travelling, you know what I mean? You've got to be so careful where you travel. We put holidays around the fact that we know there's a hospital in the area that's, you know, that we can get to. We don't travel too far. If you do travel, you make sure you've got all your meds on you. Pregnancies as well, just trying to get pregnant is extremely hard because trying to make love is extremely hard, you know. So everything is harder than it really needs to be.
And getting pregnant's hard enough.
Exactly.
Without the added pressures.
Yeah. And then you go through the whole thing that you don't know if your pregnancy is ectopic until you've had your scan. And every woman with endometriosis kind of needs to be mindful that if the egg can't jump and it remains in that fallopian tube and does become, you know, fertilised, that's a whole other plate of fish there, you know. But yeah, it's fully encompassing. It's life-changing, and I hate it. But when you hate something, you've got to take that negativity and turn it on its head. So I hate it with a passion, but I'm passionate about it. That makes any sense?
It makes perfect
Absolutely.
sense. You've taken
ownership of that.
You've taken this, I don't even know how to describe it with the respect and the gravity that it deserves, but you've taken this illness that impacts you in every way in your life, and you're doing so much positive with it. You're helping so many people with it. You're reaching an audience with it, and people need to hear about it. The sheer impact it has on so many aspects of your life. Again, I wouldn't have known about any of this stuff if it hadn't been for the campaigning, and then watching the film as well. Just really, really hit home. I guess there's only so far as men could get it.
Yeah.
But you've got us to a place where we get as much as we can get it without personally going through it, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And that's a job well done by everybody involved.
Can I just say as well, sorry, this is like a wee bit of a tangent, just because I feel like you're going to go into something.
No, of course.
One of my, when you're talking about holidays and things, one of my really good friends has got Crohn's disease.
Oh, yeah.
And he went through the exact same thing, misdiagnosis, you're just a sore tummy, like, don't worry about it. And to the point where he was like dying,
Yeah.
And now he's had 2 surgeries, he's gone through it all. He's on pain management all the time, and he has to do the same. Like, he has to plan literally every aspect of his day around this disease.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's the only thing I can it to. But
yeah.
It's also, it feels so unfair to have to qualify yourself all the time. To your employer, to medical professionals, to whoever else, continuously having to qualify yourself and saying, this is real, this is really impacting me.
Yeah. I remember keeping sick days because it's as an endo person, you've got to call it. So you know you're ill, and you know you probably shouldn't be at your work, but you know you could be iller. So you'll go into your work that day as ill as you are, because you need to keep it up your sleeve that you're probably going to be iller in 3 days' time. You don't want to be off sick for 3 days. So you'll persevere and you'll go in for that. And most of us, I tried very hard not to be off sick at all, but most of the time I was sitting at my desk like death warmed up. Do you know what I mean? But it also meant that when you went off with a regular thing like tonsillitis or, you know, there's just any regular virus, you'd feel extremely guilty the fact that you're not at your work because you've got a virus. So you'd still go into your work, and before you know it, all you're doing is pacifying people you work with because you know that they'll judge you and it can be used against you. Do you know what I mean? So we are, it's like the mask I was speaking to you about earlier. We are fantastic at wearing a mask. I just think it's so sad that we literally choose when we think it's appropriate to go off sick.
Yeah.
For a chronic illness as well.
Yeah. Yep. I found it extremely interesting. You guys know I'm vocal, so I'd caught, and I love Hannah Bardell, she's fantastic. But
I'm going to ask you about her because she's obviously given a lot of support to the
She's
cause.
been fantastic. I caught a little post that she'd done, and it was about colitis and Crohn's, and I was like, go Hannah. And in the post I just popped down, absolutely salute the fact that she'd done a thing in Westminster on them, absolutely salute your work here. Just be mindful that when you're talking about Crohn's and colitis, you're also consider endometriosis, because the effect that Crohn's and colitis is, we experience exactly the same thing. We shit ourselves. We can't go to the toilet. We end up with diverticulitis, you know. So while you're fighting for those communities, please continue to fight for us. And she did. She went down to Westminster and she raised the question, not just for endometriosis, but colitis and Crohn's. And I was so, so grateful to her, because if we can piggyback, that's the thing with Endo, we're literally piggybacking on other people. We piggyback onto the menopause, we piggyback onto Crohn's and colitis because it's inflammatory. We piggyback onto so many other conditions because that's the only way you can maybe get understanding and get the word out to say, you recognise that pain? Well, guess what? That pain's exactly the same as our pain because we're all dealing with inflammation, you know? So when you get people that have got big, massive balls and can stand up in Westminster and say, this is an issue, this needs to change, she's been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I actually had this written down here. I was going to ask, how important is it to have someone with the profile of your local MP to support the cause? How did that come about? Did you approach her? How did that happen?
Yeah. I hunt people down.
Good, keep doing it.
Well, not always, not always.
No, you hunted me down.
The target found you.
The master plan was always that if you've got a support group, then you're getting fed information from X amount of people within your community, and that information is real, it's factual, it's their lived experience. But you don't want that just to sit there and not do anything with it. So it's important to take that information and then go to your people in power and say, right, guys, we have got a whole sector of women here, or those assigned female at birth, that are experiencing this problem. What can you do to help us? And that's generally how we've done it. Do you know what I mean? Just Angela Constance, Hannah Bardell, Neil Findlay, you name it. You know, we've been in their company and we've asked them to support endometriosis, and majority of the time they've done a motion for us as well, which has got, you know, which is more further awareness too, which is fantastic. But yeah, it's vitally important to have the support of these people, because you don't have a voice in Parliament. They are your voice. And if they can put your feelings forward, then you can't really ask for more than that. What's important is that the decision makers give appropriate funding and recognise that there is an area here where we're being done a disjustice. I mean, suppose X amount of us want to go to our work. That, I think it's 8.2 billion, they say, is the effect it has on the economy in respect of endometriosis and time off work, you know. So if we could try and put something in there so that there's something being done for us, that would bring that number down. But until somebody's got an open wallet, I don't know when that's going to be.
We had a question we spoke about, and it's one of those, in your ideal world, what does the future look like when it relates to endometriosis? So none of us have a magic wand, but if you could wave the magic wand, what would it look like? What would the future look like for people that suffer from endometriosis? What could be done in a perfect world? In a perfect world,
we would have more excision specialists in Scotland. We don't have enough.
Is there a lack of that in Scotland?
There's a lack, yeah. There's actually a lack of it across the world. I think there's 176 excision specialists across the world for 200 million women. That's not a lot. And the thing about endometriosis is that you've got excision, which is classed as the gold standard, and then you've got ablation, which is lasering the way the endometriosis. I've received both forms, laser and ablation and excision. It hasn't stopped my endometriosis from coming back, unfortunately, but early diagnosis is key. So if we can even get the younger demographic to It's so hard because they go to the doctor, Aidan, and the doctor flings a contraceptive pill at them and they take it for 3 years until their symptoms get worse, and then they go back to the doctor and they change their pill and they put them on a different pill.
Why is that? Is there a lack of education with professionals about what to look for from people in a younger stage of their life?
Yeah, I think it's more to do with the lack of options as well. Because the investment hasn't been there, we are literally relying in the first instance on a contraceptive pill because the condition is hormonal and inflammatory. So they'll give you some Ponstan, for example, which will maybe help some cramping, some traumatic, can't get the word out, transmatic acid, which will, help with heavy bleeding. But everything's elastoplast on an open wound, and it's, once you eventually take that elastoplast off, that wound's massive and it's nasty. And yeah, the investment's not there for doctors. And I don't know why. I've tried to speak to doctors to say, why do you do this? But it's a nice guidelines. They're following a set of guidelines that have been decided, and that's literally what they're working to. But for us, it's very much like you're pacifying somebody. But that's the treatment plan. It's contraceptives, and then after that, it's your GnRH agonists, and then after that, it's your tamoxifens and letrozoles, basically. That's all ways of, they all stop the pituitary gland from releasing estrogen, basically. So these drugs go in and they stop the pituitary gland from sending a signal to the ovaries to say, fire up, guys, because you're in a chemical state of menopause. And that's your brain. Like they're fucking about with the brain,
And not the actual physical aspect of that.
Correct. On the basis it might shrink. Here's the thing. Where's your evidence that it's shrinking? Because I went to the Scottish Government with this. And I've said to them, you're giving us all these drugs. Where is your database to tell me if drug A is effective, if drug B is effective? There is no database. There's no database because nobody gives a shit. And I'm just going to say that now. That's the impression that I get, and I'm sure you felt that as well. You think in 40 years of women taking the same medication that something would change. We've seen iPhone 14s come out. We've got electric cars, do you know what I mean? And we're still using drugs that were designed in the 60s and 70s because investment's just not there. And I think that's so sad, It's a suck it and see approach.
Especially when it affects so much of the population. Do you know what I mean? Like that 8 billion could take a fraction of that, invest it in studies and medicine that's actually going to be effective, get people back to work.
It's one of those things where the people that are the powers that be, if it was their partners or their mothers or their daughters
or them.
I know you say Endo people, so they're people who are impacted by this. Then it becomes personal and then they have a more vested interest in it.
Yeah.
What do any viewers who don't have any direct experience with this, what do they need to know? What can they do to help your cause?
So we ask all our people to keep a diary, keep a journal of what you're experiencing, and keep it over 3 months, not just a month.
So this is for people who do suffer from endometriosis?
Yes. So when you've got somebody that thinks they might have endometriosis, we automatically recommend that they keep a journal of basically how their menstrual cycle behaved during that 3 months. And if 9 times out of 10, you can see a trend in the 3 months. For example, the 21 days that I talk about, and what we say to those women is take that information, go to your doctor and say to them you'd like a referral to a gynaecologist. And that's where the little situation arises where they'll be like, well, not refer you to a gynaecologist right now. We'll give you Cerazette, which is a contraceptive pill. Let's try on that first of all and see how you go. So there you've got a 14-year-old kid, do you know what I mean, who's went for help and who's been sent away with a contraceptive pill. And that's for them. In respect to their families, to mums and dads, etc., I think the younger demographic are still reasonably private. While they're happy to go on social media and do their thing, I don't think they're rocking up to their mum and dad necessarily and saying, I'm having a terrible time. Do you know what I mean? I know for me, I told my mum I had heavy periods, but I never told her about my bowel problems. I never told her about the constant UTIs. I never told her I could see blood in the toilet. I never said any of that. She just knew I had heavy periods, so it's really important that family members are armed with the right tools to be able to help their loved one, whether it be hair holding while they're vomiting, make them a wee cup of tea, pick the bairn up for the school, whatever you can do it. and do it with compassion and care, you know.
So you were saying there, sorry to interrupt you, I think it is like such an embarrassing thing to have to talk about. Do you know what I mean? Like, if anyone, do you know what I mean? If you see blood in the toilet or whatever, it's like the automatic like reaction of
especially
absolute
if you're like
fear.
14 years old.
You would never expect that. And I think straight away I would be like, shit, you keep it and then you bottle it up and then try and get an appointment for the GP, and it's then there that you're having to embarrass yourself further by talking to them.
Yeah.
And tell that story again and again and again.
Correct.
It's scary.
Yep. And I mean, there's not a lot of internal examinations happening either. A lot of the young kids that are going to the doctor are, like I said, just being shoved on the pill. But I had gone to the doctor on multiple occasions, and it just was this one occasion I was so lucky that I'd went and I'd saw, he's no longer here, but he was called Dr. Paris, and he was a gynae registrar for a wee while, so he had quite a lot of knowledge. And I was desperately upset. My bowel habits had turned green. So that's how poorly I was. And I remember saying to him, I'm really struggling here just to try and keep it together. I'm very ill. And he says, let's have a feel of your tummy. Nobody'd ever felt my tummy before. So I jumped up on the bed and had a wee examination, went up inside, and he says, your ovaries aren't floating. I said, what do you mean? What do you mean floating? He says, your ovaries are meant to float. That's how they behave. Okay. And yours aren't. Oh, well, where are they? Have I lost them? No. I think they're stuck down though. And I think that's why you're in so much pain and why you're vomiting and why you're going green to the toilet. Going to need to get you referred immediately. So I got a referral done down to the gynae. And they seen me and they said, oh, you're only 21. And I said, yeah, I'm 21. You're awfully young for endo. Am I young for endo? Yeah, too young for endo. Tell you what, off you go, off you trot. We'll see you in 6 months' time. I was like, are you joking? Oh my God, my world literally ended. I remember breaking my heart in my car, like snot bubbles and everything. That's just been gaslit, do you know what I mean? So I phoned my dad, and he had heard me in the toilet at night because, like I said on the STV thing, the thing about endo is, yeah, you've got bad periods, you might have heavy periods, you might have no periods, but your bowel is reacting so badly to this condition that you will wake up from a slumber and you will end up being terribly, terribly unwell for a period of time in the toilet where you can't get out. And my dad had heard that. So my dad had heard that often. And he says, now, I'd been told I had an eating disorder because I was vomiting so profusely. So I'd been given loads of different diagnoses from the ages of 9 right up until I was 21. All of them psychological, to be honest, you know, apart from the eating disorder one. And I was really upset. And as a kid, I actually thought I was off my rocker. I genuinely thought maybe I had a wee screw loose. So my dad had says, no having this. So he called the gynae and he says, my daughter's just been in, she's 21. You've treated her like this today. I am no having it. I want another appointment for her and I want you to see her again. And I want a proper gynae this time. So sure enough, within 3 weeks, a letter of apology came out. I had another appointment, another gynae. And this gynae sat down and he says, like, we'll do a wee examination, a wee internal. So they did the internal again. Hit the roof. And it's a noise that it's almost like a yelp or a whimpering. It's the most internal, excruciating pain you could imagine. And it's just, and it shouldn't be. Somebody's doing something that should be done, you know. And he knew immediately with the way that my body reacted that I did have endometriosis. So within 3 weeks I had surgery, and in such a short period of time I'd been left with just one ovary. The damage was done. The ovary was stuck and damaged. The eggs couldn't jump. I was being watched over for ectopic pregnancy. My bowel was stuck to my sigmoid colon was stuck to my uterus. My ligaments were all damaged. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. And they did what they could for me on that one surgery, and I got opened up again in 3 months to have a further surgery. And at this point, the biggest thing was conservation of fertility. It wasn't my health. It was to have a baby. This woman needs to have a baby. She needs to have one now. Let's get her pregnant. Because the whole thing is that if you get pregnant, your endometriosis will get better. I can categorically say to you that's bullshit. It doesn't work like that. And that's how your life goes. You're almost dictated to. And if you don't look like you're meeting the criteria, you will stop getting treatment. So if I'd have turned and said, no, I don't want to get pregnant just now, Oh, it'd have been, well, I don't know what else you want us to do for you, you know? So we went along with that. I never got pregnant until I was 27. And I was 21 when my journey started with operations, etc. I've had 16 in total. And I've had 4 as a woman in hysterectomy as well. So I've got postmenopausal endometriosis. And in theory, I shouldn't have it anymore. But yeah, it's a multifaceted, horrible entity that really does steal your hopes and dreams.
I don't even know how to respond in the right way.
It's very powerful.
I want to say thank you for... You're in a room with 3 men right now.
I know.
We've got our brains of the operation behind the camera and me and Mark here. But I want to say thank you for trusting us in this conversation, for letting us be part of this conversation. I want to check what time we've got. We've got about 5 minutes. Is there anything you want to ask before we get to the end?
No, I just think, like, the film is beautiful. I really liked it. It was hard, and I honestly was like, Jesus Christ. Like, because I had no idea how damaging it was. I've seen people obviously posting about it, and I've seen people going through that journey of being told, have a baby, it won't happen anymore, and then they've had kids, and then it's just got worse and worse and worse. Yeah. I really appreciate you both coming in. I really appreciate how open you've been with your story. I think it's really beautifully told. As hard and as graphic as it is, I think it's important, and I don't know, I feel really moved, man. Holy shit. Like, genuinely, it's been amazing, eh?
Me too. I feel privileged to be allowed to be part of the conversation. It's really hit me.
I know. It's a lot. It's a lot to take on board, and it's a lot of different things all contributing towards this one entity, you know. But I'd like to take a wee second to thank Emily as well for choosing us, you know, because you could have went a different direction, but you didn't, for choosing to work with us, because Deviant has given us, an opportunity to show understanding to other people and to try and break the misconceptions that surrounds endometriosis.
Where can people see it? Is there a way for people to view it?
Well, yeah, it's actually on Emily's website.
Yeah, it's
online. Can you
online.
plug the website, please?
And so it's just my website, so it's just emilybeaney.com, but it's also on Vimeo as well.
Yeah, send us a link and we'll
put it on the YouTube bio.
Put it on the YouTube. How can people follow Endo Warriors?
Yeah, so we've got Instagram, X, which was Twitter. Facebook's our biggest kind of portal. That's where a lot of our work happens, is on Facebook. So yeah, just type in Endo Warriors West Lothian in your search bar and we will come up. We've got a private members hub that is based on lived experience. So there's myself and Claire, and we've got a small admin team as well. And it's just, if you're looking to come to a place that's filled with compassion, love and support, then we're the kind of group for you. We don't like to focus too much on negative, and while we realise it's a negative condition, we like to try and uplift our women. We like them to feel valued and supported. And my biggest aim is to give them the correct tools so they can go and advocate for their own health to the best of their ability, because they've only got 15 minutes to try and get their experiences out to a doctor or a GP on the hope that they come away with something more than a contraceptive pill.
Before we wrap up, is there anything we haven't asked or covered that you want to say or need to say in this space at the moment?
I think probably to family members and partners, if you are living with somebody who is potentially waiting for a diagnosis or has a diagnosis, be kind, show them that you care, and don't judge them, because endometriosis can come on in seconds. I've seen it myself. I've been ready to leave the house, coats on, scarves on, all dolled up, feeling great. Just like that, comes on. Oh my God. And you know right away, that's it. The day is going to be a write-off, you know. While your partner's all stood up, you've paid for tickets to go to the theatre. That's the things, all those wee things, it takes your fun away. I've not been able to go camping with my husband. My husband loves camping. He loves it. And I can't, because I know that I could be stuck in a field for 5 hours shitting in a bucket, and I can't do that. And I'm speaking for lived experience, because I sat in a field for 5 hours shitting in a bucket. Do you know what I mean? And Granny Seal and Hema will never go back. Never go back. And that's endo life. Do you know what I mean? Your husband's lying in his bed sleeping, you're in a field shitting in a bucket. Isn't he sexy? Do you know what I mean? And you're not just shitting in a bucket, you're also looking to spew somewhere as well, because it's double-ended. It's not just, oh, I'm having a shit, it's I'm having a shit and a bleh, because you're literally filled. There is no space left in your body. So it's coming up, the food's coming up that can't be digested, and the food that hasn't worked its way through your intestines is equally sitting there as well. And that's because instead of your intestines running on nice and smooth like that, your intestines hooked up there, and it's hooked up here, and it's stuck round there, and it's like a zigzag for a little poo to try and get round, you know. So, yeah, yeah. If MD is recognises that from their loved one or partner, be kind and give them lots and lots of love.
Thank you. We always finish by doing final thoughts. Remember Jerry Springer used to do final thoughts.
Yeah.
So we always offer. You don't have to if you don't want to. We just offer everyone a chance to just very briefly give any final thoughts.
A happy thought. Something happy to end on.
I will start just to set the tone. I just want to say I think that you're remarkable. I think the Endo Warriors are remarkable. I think you as a filmmaker are remarkable. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the film. Thank you for educating us. I will do whatever I can with my voice and my platform and talking to people to help raise awareness. If there's anything we can do, come back to us. We'll do whatever we can. I'm a father to a daughter. A partner to a beautiful woman, and I have a mother and friends that are female, and whatever we can do, we shall do. And thank you for trusting us again. Thank you for trusting us tonight with this conversation. Anything you would like to finish off by saying?
I couldn't already say that. I'm honestly feel privileged to be able to hear your story and be a part of it. And it was a really intense conversation, like emotional conversation, and to trust us and Ronnie as well to be a part of that. And to tell people, do you know what I mean? This is going to be online. Yeah. It's a very open and frank discussion. I feel privileged to be a part of it. So thank you guys both.
Well, thank you for having us.
Do you have any final thoughts you would like to share or say?
I would just like to thank you both, and also Candice. I think it's so important to have platforms like this where you're speaking to all sorts of people and highlighting really important topics. And I think also what you were saying about thanking Candice for letting you in. I never really appreciated that when I was asking all these questions to yourself, and it is such a privilege to be let into your space in your world and for you to share everything. You are such an open person, and it takes a lot to share your story again and again for the betterment of everyone around you. So
yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Final thoughts for myself. Your body never lies. Listen to your body. It's a fantastic piece of equipment. Respect it, and try and have fun when you can, because we're only here for a wee while, not here for a long time. So try and have a wee bit of fun. But thank you for picking us. Thank you for choosing us as well. And I'm privileged to be here. You guys have done absolutely amazing. Can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've been two lads for the scheme. Thank you very much.
Tell me something.